Okay, great. Thank you for joining today's demo. So today I do not plan to show any slides actually, but I wanted to show more online demo. I'm kind of, I would say, not really like those things. So if something will go bad, please don't hate me. Okay, so today's demo called Magento Core support for the Cloud Docker. And this idea was born a lot of time ago, and the idea was that since we created the Cloud Docker environment, and this mainly focused on the Magento Cloud customers, why wouldn't we extend the capabilities and make it available for the wider range of developers, for our core developers, for the community developers, for everybody who work with Magento core, so they can also use this kind of environments. And there were a lot of actually, I would say, not the problems, but difficulties to make it happen. We had to optimize a lot. We had to think about file synchronization. You might know that we have 3 different types of file synchronization because all of them have some advantages and disadvantages. And also Docker made pretty interesting and important update lately. So they introduced a new kind of file synchronization for Macintosh. So it actually made us believe in our own power. So we tried and we actually added possibility to use Cloud Docker for the core development. So here you can see the pull request which actually adds it, but I will go more through the configurations. Let's keep it kind of discussion time. So if you have questions, please let me know. So let's begin with the project structure. I'm locally using PHP Store as my favorite IDE, but it can be different for you. The idea is actually how you keep your directories structure. So let's assume you have some kind of Magento project. You may be a community contributor, or you may be a core developer. It doesn't really make much difference, but the idea is you always have some kind of project. For me, a root directory will be called Magento to local. Hope you can see everything. So for me, it will be Magento to local directory, which will include different subdirectories, which represents different repositories. The most important will be Magento to CE, which is our Magento Community Edition and the easiest way to contribute to Magento. So in most cases, you should have Magento to local or your root directory, and we have your community edition installation. So having this in mind, let's see how we can add our Cloud Docker dependency. So it's pretty easy technically. So what we will need to create a composer JSON file on the root level of our project. Why does it matter? Because it will be kind of parent for our child directories. So this means that our Docker files like docker compose .docker will be on the same level as our Magento code itself, and that actually makes a lot of sense. So we will need to add our dependencies. I'm using the bench from my pull request since it's not released version of Cloud Docker, but once it will be released, you should be able to use the repo.magento.com. And what is interesting here is Magento Cloud Docker is pretty standalone project. It does not require EC tools. So technically, you could deploy your Magento locally without EC tools, and I will show you how to do it. But of course, we still recommend to use EC tools, so you have different possibilities. So in the require section, you'll need to add Magento Cloud Docker, and that's pretty all. So once you will have your Magento Cloud Docker and you will run composer update, you should have this dependency installed. So in the end, you will have a very small vendor, which will include Magento Cloud Docker, and all of this here. The next actually thing that you should remember that you always need to pass some kind of configuration to describe what kind of Docker environment you would need. And for those who are familiar with Magento Cloud, the main configuration source file is actually the magento.app.yaml, which is, I would say, a very good configuration file source, but it is very cloud specific file. And we do not really want to move cloud knowledge to your local instances because it's kind of different things. Of course, you can, but it depends. If you're contributing to the Magento open source or maybe Magento partner, you don't really need to have any cloud files. But if you're cloud developer, you should have. So it very depends on your specific use case scenario. The thing is, we support a few different ways how you can pass configuration to the Cloud Docker. The most, I would say, basic way is you pass the configuration via the build compose CLI command. You pass some options and you configure your Docker compose. The second option is the Magento Docker YAML. We created this configuration file specifically for our Cloud Docker project, and it's very simple. I would say declarative schema of the environment that you would like to build, and I will actually go through all of these entities because it's very important for our project. And actually, the third way how you can pass the configuration for Cloud Docker is using the JSON payload string. We do not have many examples with this, but we are using on our different pipelines. So it actually makes sense for CI/CD configurations and CI/CD pipelines. So let's move forward. For this demo, I will use Magento Docker YAML, which is pretty good for now for us. And we will need to specify different configurations here. So first of all, we'll need to specify the name for our application. Maybe it's used by volume naming, and also we need to specify if you have fewer different projects, we will have to have some kind of distinguish between them, so it should be pretty good enough for us. The second one is a mod. So as you remember, Cloud Docker works in the few mods. It can be production or developer. Since we are trying to make our Magento works locally, it will use a developer mode. And this is a new configuration which called root dir. And the idea of root dir is that we actually specify the target folder for our Magento directory. So you remember, we have Magento 2CE folder, which contains our Community Edition source code. And of course, if we want, we will have some Magento 2 Enterprise Edition, but it will still be one folder since you want to put everything into Magento 2CE. You can use some kind of some linking, or you maybe want to copy it, but you still will have one target source code folder. So what happens next? You will have to specify the sync engine. In my demo, I will use Mutagen, since like personally for me it's the fastest, the most stable way to synchronize locally and with Docker environments. You also need to specify the set of services. So for this installation, I'm using the 2.4 develop branch, which actually works with both 7.3 and 7.4. But anyway, I will use 7.3 just for the demo purposes. You will also need a few extensions. So this is kind of important step because by default, once you will add the PHP service, it will have some default enabled services, but for example, it will not have XSL and SOD extensions enabled by default. So you will have this, you will have to specify this list of service of extensions. You also need to specify the version of Magento. We will use 10.3 MariaDB, Redis, and Elasticsearch. Everything is pretty strict. We'll also need Selenium, but if you would like to run the MFTF test is also the part of Selenium capabilities. You can specify mounts. This is a directory that you will share or mount on the Docker. For development environment, it doesn't make much difference. But if you are running the production version of your environment, it is very important to have these volumes added. Otherwise, you will have problems with mounting. You also need to have the mutagen script. So since I'm using mutagen to synchronize, I just created the script here. And the idea is actually you have to specify what kind of files you synchronize. So for me, I'm synchronizing CE folder into the Docker app folder. I'm using two-way method. Also, I am specifying this file nodes, so everything is best practices, and adding some ignore files. So this one is very similar to the mutagen .sh script that we include with the Cloud Docker once you run the composer update. The only big difference is actually this folder, since it is currently pointing to the specific folder in our project. What else? Another thing that you will need to remember the .docker folder. So once you run composer update, you will just have to double check that everything is fine here. You have all of the credentials generated, database, Redis, Elasticsearch, some rows, variables. And in most cases, you don't really need to change here anything, but just in case, keep in mind that we have this configuration file if you need to change any services access. So that's all. So technically, once you run the build compose, with this file, it will generate you this Docker compose file. This is interesting feature we added in recent pull request. So it shows the latest command that was used to generate this file. So you'll have this Docker compose file enabled and present, and it will describe you the different services here. I can describe all the services that you describe in the Magento.docker YAML, database, Redis, Elasticsearch, FPM, and so on. So it will have everything here. The next step is actually following the steps to spin up your environment. So you will have to run a few things. You will have to spin up your containers, and then you'll have to run the mutagen sync. So let's probably begin with the blanket stuff. So I'm destroying my current containers down -v to get the beginning. Let's remove them all. Okay, while I'm stopping containers, I wanted to show another step which we'll need. So remember, once we will spin up our containers, once we run the mutagen, we'll have to install Magento in some way. So you'll also have possibility to use EC tools. But as I said, you have possibility also to use a local script. So for the demo purposes, I will use an installation script, which I call Docker install. So the script is very simple. It's actually runs setup install on the deploy containers with the parameters that I passed from the config.php. this and specifies some configurations to the Magento application. So everything that you would anyway in most cases run locally. So let's give it a try. So first of all, I will run docker compose up minus d and spin up my containers. Let's give it a little bit time. Yeah, so while we spin up containers, so of course, you have possibility to change the deploy mode in your script, because in some cases you maybe want to check the production mode, in some cases you maybe want to check developer mode, and also you should remember that production mode will be even better from synchronization perspective, because in production you have less files synchronized both ways, and it will have some performance different. So if you're planning to check some production mode, or you would like to run the performance test, or would like to run an MFTF test, I would actually recommend to use production deploy mode. And this is parameters that I use for the MFTF test, so it will depend on your case. So once we spin up our containers, what we will do next is we will run mutagen sync sh. It should not take a while. Create a session, and here we have possibility to always see what happens with our mutagen sync list files. So on the first run, if you just install the mutagen, if you never add it to your project, it will take some time to synchronize first big chunk of files. And so we'll have to just monitor a little bit what happens. But if you're already using mutagen and actually just stopping it for this project, for this particular project, and then you start it again, it actually takes a very small amount of time to synchronize files. But let's wait a little bit while staging the process. Maybe you have any questions at this point we can discuss. Okay, I think I would like to show one more interesting trick. So recently I was running the Jupyter performance suite on my Cloud Docker instance, and it was running locally with Cloud Docker. It was pretty good experience. So if you feel like you would like to run some performance tests locally, like it's okay. It's not a big deal. But of course, if you run performance tests and you need to have clear measurements, I always recommend to have some separate instance, maybe some tool instance with installed Cloud Docker or whatever you prefer. But just keep in mind that local environment and less stable than separate instances. Okay, so our mutagen is done with synchronization. That means we are able to go to the next step. And for the next step will be actually to run the installation script. So let's take a look. So in my installation script, I am removing the init.php file just in case, and then I am running setup install, and then I am changing some parameters. Also in my installation, I was running some S3 configuration setup. I was generating some profile. So this is some kind of touch point where you would like to install your environment. So let's run docker install and see what happens. Give it a bit time. So we started installing Magento locally. Remember, we're installing from the Git sources. So if you are switching the branches, if you are pulling some new code, it will require to probably clean some caches, cleaning the generated folder. So everything you would do it with Git installation, you will still have to perform here. The only difference is that it will take some small amount of time to recognize the changes between local file system and the Docker. But as you can see here, it's pretty fast process to install Magento once you have Metagen running. I haven't felt any big issues with it. It's much slower using native sync, which was previously OS sync, and currently they changed it to Fuse sync. Actually, I wanted to show it to you. So let's open my Docker. So they call currently is gRPC Fuse sync. It was previously known as XFS sync. And I see a big improvements actually. It's possible to work even in this setup, but still not as fast as Mutagen sync. So you should also remember the difference. Okay, so yeah, technically installed Magento. I see success. I see all the configuration stuff. So let's give it a try. Let's open our Magento to Docker and check if everything is fine. Let's give it a second. Let me show sync. So yeah, a bit about files. So again, so you will have to think about this two main things. So you have generated folder, which in my development mode will change a lot, and it will go both ways. And also you should remember about the var caches folder. So since you will have cache synchronized, you will have to clean it here, and then it will be cleaned on the Docker. If you would like, you can add the caches folder into the Mutagen here and ignore it, but just keep in mind that it will depend on your use case. Whether you want to have control locally over the cache or you would like to put it all to the Docker itself. So we opened our Magento environment, installed from Git. It works. Let's see how it works. It's pretty, I would say, fast. Comparing to another environment, it's actually good. So I installed medium profile, and I haven't seen big problems with it. Medium profile works pretty good. If you go to the admin panel, let's try admin panel. Let's try login, admin, and some password. And let's. So yeah, here we have the admin panel. Hello. From the difference, you will see that Magento version not set. It's actually very expected because we install from the Git source, if we not install from Composer, and it's not able to force correct version. So you will see this, but everything else you should not feel any big difference. It should all work as expected. So the indexes and crons, you will have to configure via the configuration file, since we actually remember the crons will being configured via the configuration files and via Docker Compose. So if you need crons, you will have to configure the Magento Docker YAML, add crons here, and then regenerate Docker Compose. Another actually interesting thing is how you stop your container. So you have a very easy way to change your services set. So let's assume I want to, for example, add Selenium. So let's change Selenium true. And after that, I will, okay, let's check that we do not have Selenium here. Selenium. Yeah, we do not have Selenium container in Docker Compose, but we want to add it. So we do not have to destroy our environment completely. What we will do, we will just run Docker Compose without -v option. It's very important because we don't want to destroy our volumes. So we will run Docker Compose down. After this, we will run our favorite vendor being ec docker build compose command. And let's look at the Docker Compose. Okay, Selenium. And here we have Selenium service present. It's very handy if you play with different services, if you would like to change the version of database or version of Redis. But changing some version of database may require destroying volumes because data may be not compatible, but it's really depends in this case also. But this is the easy way how you can change your services. So after this, we'll just again run Docker compose up -d, start our containers. And hopefully you don't have any issues with mutagen, which can happen because of the stopped containers. We should see it back online. Let's give it this time. Yes. Okay, he sees that Selenium has been started. Everything is fine. Let's go to Magento Docker again. And yeah, so the trick here is that actually mutagen didn't stop. Mutagens continue to synchronize files, and since we didn't remove volumes, actually mutagen nothing changed. But at the same time, on the backend level, the infrastructure level, we spin up new container, and it's a very interesting, I would say, feature. So, and it was very easy. So that's mostly all for today's demo. We can discuss some questions if you have any for the remaining time.
Oleh, Alejandro here. How are you?
Hello. Good.
Yeah, just first of all, thank you so much for a very nice demo about Docker. But my question is regarding about use the Magento Docker in Magento open source, if it is possible to running that interface or architecture of Docker on open source version.
So this is definitely the open source version. So Magento Cloud Docker is available with your open source keys. It's not enterprise edition. And also here you see that I cloned the Magento 2 CE. So it is also open source version. So once you have open source keys, you should not have any problems installing Magento and installing Magento Cloud Docker. So yes, it is.
Okay, got you. So basically, we can use Magento Docker in order to run our Magento open source version and deploy and working on our local environment without any issue.
Yeah, that's actually what in my open demo. Yeah, you should not have issues. Just remember, this is functionality which will release in next release. So you may want to wait a little bit once you release it and once you have proper documentation. But technically, even now, it's not restricted from using only on the edition.
And the last one is all your install script that you show on your screen. This is something that you can share with the community, or is something you are using for you only?
So this is definitely that I believe that most of the developers should have locally. There is nothing secret here. It is just run stop install with specific options. The only trick here is that you should remember the configuration of your services which we have here. So you just take this, for example, Redis. We take host Redis 46379, and then you put it into the Docker install as where is our Redis? Okay, I don't have Redis here. Let's take another example. Okay, Elasticsearch, which is Elasticsearch and port 9200, and you pass it here. So you just make this connection to yourself, but I think we definitely will share this kind of script just for example how to run it.
Yeah. Thank you. No, it's in order to follow the right direction of somebody that is working perfectly or somebody's know what she's doing with Docker, Magento Docker, just for it. So thank you so much. No more question from my side.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your question. Anything else?
Yes, I have a question. Okay, hi Oleh. My question is, how can I do if I want to migrate my Magento? How can I do to migrate all image or all environment to the new version of Magento? For example, if I have Magento 2.3.5 and I have all image and Docker environment. So next time I want to migrate my Magento to 2.4. I know that for this migration, I would like to have a new version of Elasticsearch, a new version of PHP, and Redis and Vanish. So how can I do to migrate it? All this infrastructure in my local environment. Can you give me a right step or a right instruction? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So technically, mission is never easy, but with such kind of environment, it should be in few steps. So you will have to, technically, you will have to stop your containers, which is down, without removing the volumes. After that, you will have to change the version of your PHP 7.4. After this, you actually spin up again your containers, which actually I don't. It may not work for me, but just let's assume. You spin up your containers, and after that, depending on your service, you will have to run another script. So once you operate your services, you will have to run the not Docker install, but Docker actually set up update. So this will perform update on the Magento with new services. Yeah, the trick here is not to lose the data. so you don't want to remove volumes. And once you keep the volumes, it should be not actually a big deal to perform the update to Magento. That's actually what happens on Magento Cloud if like think about it from top level. Yeah. So what happens here? I just actually change the version of PHP, and then I actually clean up my environment, and it actually works on the different version of PHP. But the only also pitfall can be that you may need to run composer update because technically once you switch the PHP version, for example, you need to run the composer update here, and then you need to pull the specific packages which works with the new version of PHP. So yeah, so there are actually three steps. First of all, do not remove volumes and just stop containers. Then make your changes. If you want to change PHP version, run composer update. After this, spin up containers and run bin Magento setup update, and then it will be enough for like I would say for standard cases of migration. If it will be something complicated, you will need additional investigation, but it is some default flow that we're using currently.
Okay. Okay, thank you. If I understand well, because in my environment, I don't have docker install.sh. I don't have this file. I only have docker compose.yaml. So I think that I can modify or update the version of different image directly in this docker compose YAML and try to make a new docker up minus d
Yeah.
and try to
Yeah.
make composer update directly. It's run well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank
yeah,
you very
you build the images with a new version,
Yeah.
Magento 4, then you
Okay.
run the compose down without -v option. Don't run -v option.
Okay.
Because you want to keep the data. So you down your containers, you update your version here, you keep your file up at 13 with the PHP here, and then once you run spin up containers with new version, you just run the bin Magento setup upgrade, and this should be enough.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Oleh.
Yeah, sure. Anything else? Okay, I'm always available in the cloud channel of our community engineering Slack. So if you have anything outside of this conversation, I will be happy to answer it. As I said, this will be available with next after the next release of Cloud Docker. So we will update also documentation, so you can always read it and follow some steps. But otherwise, this is all for today's demo, and thank you all for the joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.